Hey everybody, welcome to Faith Frequencies, where faith hits the airways. Today we got Jodi Spears, aka Mama Bear. I think that's her nickname, Mama Bear. She's going to tell us how she struggled with addiction and how faith
Yes,
drove her away from that. How you doing, Mama Bear?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm grateful to be here today. I really appreciate you all having interest in hearing my story. Because I feel like it's a pretty good one, and it has God all over it. And always has from the very beginning. So I thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely.
So,
It's our pleasure. I love the
but
way God
yeah.
works things together. I know you kind of from the Facebook community. You do run a group, and maybe you'll end up talking about that a little bit, or however much you want. God bless recovery,
Mhm,
and you go
I
by
do.
Mama Bear. I'm interested in knowing, kind of about how that name came about, and if you want everybody to call you that, or just maybe the people. Um, in your group, in that particular group. But I've worked with you before. I've
Hmm.
interviewed you. You've got
Hmm.
quite a story. But before we get into that, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself.
I
Your
do.
your
I
current
do.
demographics. How you doing, and where you coming from. And I'm just leaving the floor open to you right now,
Hmm.
Jody.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Sounds good. So, yes, my name is Jodi Spears. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic and addict. I am best known in the Facebook recovery community as Mama Bear. Um, I have been clean and sober since June 1st of 1997. So I have 28 years, 1 month, and 6 days clean and sober.
Wow.
Um, I yeah, I am um I guess in a lot of ways I my story is unique because I have because I have always felt God in my life, always. From the very beginning, and maybe some of these things are. So my dad was a sniper in Vietnam, and he came home from the war, and he met my mom, and they fell in love, and I came along at that time. I was born and raised in Colorado. I am currently living in Alabama. I live in Fort Payne, Alabama, which I love. I was not one that ever really thought I would venture outside of the state of Colorado because I always lived there. I was born and raised, and you know, but oftentimes God has different plans, and that's okay. You do what God wants you to do, and you follow His will, and everything's going to be okay. But anyway, so I'll just get right into my story. I like I said, my dad was a veteran, or a Vietnam vet. My mom was very young and naive, and she was a teenager. And this handsome soldier comes along. She falls in love. Things happen. She gets pregnant. She panicked and went home to her mom and dad. And at that time, I when she had me, my my dad didn't know. He knew that she was pregnant, but he didn't know when I was born. He didn't know anything of that nature, because she had just pretty much kept all that from him. She just panicked and left, which I can understand. Being that young, and it was early 70s. Things are very different nowadays, and but times were not the same back then. So my mom took a very dark path, from a very from a young age. Um, by the time I was 2 years old, she was getting ready to marry my second stepdad, And this man was not, he wasn't a bad man. And but sometimes two people bring out the bad in each other, and that's just really how it is. Sometimes it just happens that way. But I had a little brother. He was born when I was about 4 years old. Um, and we were at the time living in Kansas because my stepdad was in the army, and so he was in boot camp in Junction City, Kansas. So we were living there when my brother was born, and then shortly thereafter we went back to Colorado. It was very short term that we were there and living away from Colorado. So, but my brother was born, and my mom was already very much a bad alcoholic. She was very angry and very abusive, not only to myself and my brother, but to her husband. He was also very abusive. But when we went back to Colorado, they bought a house, and we had this little. I don't know. It probably looked very, very normal and everything, from the outside looking in. Um, but my house was very, very chaotic. Um, but when I was little, and this is something that I just always did. Even when I was really little, we lived in a little tiny town. I got up on Sunday mornings and I got myself ready and I walked to church. Not because anybody told me to, not because it was something that I was taught. It was something I felt. I don't. I always did. I got up and I went to church. When I was younger, when I was growing up, it was very much a community church. So I mean, non-denominational and all of that stuff. But that's where I started, was at a community church. And oftentimes I would take my brother with me. My mom, sometimes when we were living in Kansas, I even went to church then. But at that time, my mom had to take me because we lived in a bigger place, and it was just a little more dangerous. So she would take me, she would drop me off. I'd go up the steps, I'd go in, I'd attend church. When I came back out, she was there, or sometimes the neighbor would take me home. But it was always something I did. I went to church, and I lived in absolute utter chaos. We were neglected, we were abused. My they would pick up whatever it was that was closest to them to hit us with. They would double up their fists and punch us in the head. At one point, and this one is a really hard one. They took my little brother. I was about, I don't know, maybe 6 years old. He was about 2 years old, maybe a little bit more than 2 years old. He had been caught playing with a lighter. And so they held his hand out like this and ran a lighter back and forth under his hand.
Hmm.
My mom held him by the wrist as his dad held his hand up here and ran the lighter back and forth. And he was screaming in agony. And so I did what I do best. I threw a fit and caused a scene so they would stop and turn it on me. And that's just one of the many times that I did those things for my little brother, because he was my little brother. And I mean, so that was just one of those things. Well, this just went on. My parents would we would wake up in the middle of the night. Not a single adult in the house. Me, 5, 6, 7 years old, and these two little bitty kids still in diapers. No adult, and I'm taking care of them. I cleaned up the house. I was the one who did a lot of the meal preparations. We ate a lot of mac and cheese, and that was before there was a microwave. But I learned at a very young age because I had to feed us because nobody else was going to. Um, they did provide the groceries but other than that, we were on our own. And so I did that. I took on that role. I took care of my brother. I took care of my mother. She would be a mess and I would get her to bed or I would clean her up because she had thrown up on herself or she was bleeding or, whatever the case may be. Um, and so, 8 years old, my dad decides he wants to see me. And he reaches out to my aunt, and my aunt reaches out to my mom. And she told me, your dad wants to see you. I'm like, what are you talking about? My dad sees me every day. You know,
Mm.
where is he at? Why can't I see him? I thought she was talking about Tom. I thought she was talking about my stepdad. I had no idea. I had no idea that that was not my dad. And so, I was like, well, where is he? You know, um, but she explained to me that Tom was not my dad and that my biological father wanted to meet me. And she had agreed to it. And so, I'm 8 years old. Like I'm like, I'm curious. I want to figure it out. So, my mom puts me in the car the next day, and we drive up to this little town, Walden. Um, my aunt lived there, and that's where I was conceived. Was in the town of Walden, and my aunt owned a bar, and so I met my dad for the first time, my biological father, in a bar. When I walked in the door and I looked at the men sitting at the bar, I knew immediately which one was my dad, and I had never seen the men
Yeah.
ever in my life, but I knew who he was. I knew it immediately. We spent some time together. I got to be a part of his family and such, or I got to be a part of him, and like his sister and stuff. But we got to spend some time together, and then all of a sudden, I wasn't seeing him, and I didn't see him again. And I thought, well, he just didn't like me, so he just don't want to have anything to do with me. I made him mad. I don't know. I'm 8 years old and I'm completely confused because first this is my dad and then this is my dad and now this is dad and it was just it was so you know my brother and I grew up in a house of survival, and that is very different than growing up in a house of love. you know we have fought always. I mean, fought for everything we have, everything we needed. It's just been that way. um One of the things, another thing, with us when we were little, we sat out in the back seats of many vehicles outside the bar waiting for our parents to come out, but we're in the back, either in the back of the truck or in the back seat of a car. And I don't care where you are in Colorado, and it gets to be dark, it gets cold,
Yeah.
and that's just the way it is. But we would be sitting out there. My stepdad was a bronc rider and a bull rider, so we spent our weekends in drunken rodeos and all of that kind of stuff, and then to the bar, and then they would drive us home. You know, and sadly, that was very typical of everybody in that time period. It really it was more often than not is basically what I would say, because I mean, yeah, you can look at other vehicles in the parking lot and see other kids sitting in the back seats of
Yeah.
vehicles waiting for their parents to come out of the bar. But yeah, that's pretty much how it went. And yeah, they did. They would drive us around drunk, and they were reckless. And um, one time they got a big load of cocaine and they were at my aunt and uncle's house. They locked us outside of the apartment, outside, and we had nothing to eat. and we went to this store around the corner that was just a little tiny grocery store to get a few things, but it was closed. But they had left their ice chest open and unlocked, and we stole a bag of ice and a bag of frozen hamburger buns, and we sat huddled up in the doghouse, the three of us, eating that and waiting for them to come out. And
Hmm.
so yeah, that was just kind of the things that went on. And one morning my mom I was 9 years old, she decided it was time for she didn't want to be a mom, she didn't want to be a wife, she didn't want to do it anymore, she just wanted to be a drunk, I guess, is the only thing I can think. But she told my stepdad, I heard her tell my stepdad, Jeremiah is yours, that was my brother, so you keep him, and I don't know what you're going to do with Jodi. Maybe she can stay with my mom, but I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm leaving. And she did.
Hmm.
So I went to stay with my granny, and I worried nonstop about my little brother who was with his dad, who was so far from being an adult that could care for a child. But I would get to see him every day, and he was always dirty, and he was always had dirty clothes and no lunch money, and it was a nightmare to be there in that and see what my brother was going through. And I felt incredibly guilty because I was staying with my grandma, and my clothes were clean, and I got to have a bath every day, and I had food, and so I would start taking food to him, and things of that nature. You do that. And so this went on for about 3 years. I was living with my grandma, and my mom would come back and forth. She'd take me from once in a while. I don't know. I think out of guilt because she would just show up and take me and buy me all kinds of stuff, and then dump me off, and I wouldn't see her again for months at a time, or I wouldn't hear from her. And I believe she was doing the same thing to my brother. She really couldn't handle both of us at the same time, which was ridiculous because I took care of everything. But, anyways, I was living with my granny. I was doing really good. And all of a sudden, one day, she shows up and she's like, "Hey, I'm going to take you to get your ears pierced. Let's go have some fun." And I'm like, "Well, okay." And then she didn't take me back. She didn't take me back to my granny's. She took me, and she decided that we were all going to be a big happy family again. She went back to Tom. We moved into a trailer, and it was right back to the same everything. We moved to Denver, and then from there we proceeded to move from one place to another, to another, to another. My brother and I went to a total of 8 schools over a 2-year period of time,
Wow.
and eventually they split up again. And we were living in this little town called Lafayette, and Tom left, and the car had been repossessed, and they were about to throw us out of the trailer park. And I told my mom, I said, I want to talk to my dad. And she's like, "Well, you know what his phone number is?" And I said, "No, I want to talk to my dad."
Yeah.
And so she got the phone number for my biological father, and I called him, and he wasn't home. Um, his brother-in-law answered the phone, and I told him, I said, "Will you please tell my dad that his daughter Jodi called, and I would like for him to call me back." So I got to be with my dad again. And in some ways it was a relief because I would go to my dad's house for the weekend, and I wouldn't be there with that chaos. But then I would start feeling guilty. And so then I made it. So I told him, "I'm not coming to stay with you, and unless you can take my little brother." Because I couldn't leave him there to his own defenses. And he was like, he agreed right away. It was not a problem. And so myself and my younger brother would go for weekends at my dad's house with his wife and my two brothers from there and my little sister. And so like the five of us kids, really became like a unit. Um, but of course later that fell apart. So my mom decided we were going to pick up and we were going to move to Greeley, and we moved to the exact same. That's where my dad was living. My biological dad was living. We moved to the trailer park where he was living, and my mom and him proceeded to have an affair, and which turned all of us lives upside down. Of course, there's five kids and three adults, and two of them making really stupid decisions, and my mom's drinking was getting heavier and heavier, and I got frustrated and I told them, you know what, I've had enough. And so I called my stepdad and I'm like, hey, you got to come and get me. You got to come get me, and you got to come get Jeremiah, and you got to get us away from here because she's completely out of control. And he did. He came and got me, and he came and got my brother, and he kept my brother, and he took me to my granny's, and somehow my mom convinced my granny that I needed to come back, and it just got worse and worse. And so I started experimenting with drinking and pot, and I was like, yeah, this is good. I'm not remembering all of that stuff, because it was very heavy. You know, and luckily for me, well, not luckily for me, because of God, what went on in that house that was so absolutely dreadful and horrible, um, I was able to live through all of it because I had God. I always knew He was there. I always felt Him. I always, it was always there. It's like, I don't know. I think about hiding behind the couch and He was there, and He was there. I never could explain it. I just know He was. And, I mean, but it was God. There's no need to explain that. I mean, it's just, He was there. But anyway, so I started experimenting with all of that, and yeah, I was discovering that the alcohol was amazing for numbing all of that stuff, and so I was doing it from here and there, and when I could, and I was pretty decent at hiding it, and I finally got to the point where I was like, I can't live there with this. My mom and dad split up, and he went back to his wife, but then he was still coming over and sleeping with my mom, and it was just getting to be absolutely stupid, and I could not do this anymore, and so I always went and spent the summers with my aunt and uncle. And that summer, I decided enough was enough, and I was not going back to her regardless. And so I had talked to my aunt and uncle about it, and I told them, I want to live here and finish school because I know my mom's never going to make it possible for me to do that. Because I just knew, I knew my mom, and I knew how she thought. Because when they dropped me off to stay with my aunt and uncle that summer, they moved into a hotel or a motel, some seedy little hotel or motel. And my dad was a truck driver. He went over the road, and so my mom started going with him, and they had this nasty little hotel room, and they expected me to move back in with them, quit school, and just, like, I don't know what, stay in this disgusting hotel room or go on the road with them. And I told them absolutely not. I'm not quitting school. I'm going to stay here. And they're like, well, how do you think you can do that? And I said, I've already talked to Antoinette and Uncle Terry, and they're going to let me do that. They're going to let me stay here and let me finish school because that's what I have to do. That's what I need to do. And she gave into it. And why wouldn't she? She didn't have to have that responsibility anymore. Now she had gone off, and she got my dad. He was rid of all his kids, and she was rid of her kids, and now they can just drive off in their big freaking semi truck happily ever after. Whatever. Yeah, probably have some hostility about that still to this day, but it is what it is. Um, so, anyways, I'm living with my aunt and uncle. Things are pretty good. I'm keeping decent grades. I'm still experimenting with those things, and my dad gets sick. He was diagnosed in October of '88 with melanoma skin cancer. I fully believe that came from Agent Orange because nobody else has ever had it before, and my sister has had it since. But like I said, I believe fully it came from Agent Orange, because it's not something that was typical in our family at all, or whatever. It just my dad would be soaked clear through his fatigues to his skin in Agent Orange, and soaking wet, dripping wet in this chemical. And these were the very few things that my dad would talk about when it came to the war, was that being in the jungle and those American planes coming over and dropping that, and but and him being soaked in it. So, October, he was diagnosed. July 5th of 1989, my dad died. He died a very horrible death. He was taking chemo treatments. Chemo treatments tend to cause blood clots. He had blood clots form in his lungs. He came home. He was throwing up. He hit his head on the toilet. Blood clots came loose, and he suffocated to death. And yeah, that my dad died, but I had made amends with him. Um, and for that, I'm grateful. I'm grateful, but it sent me into a spiral, and I got to the point where I was drinking all the time. I would get on the school bus and go to school because it was 11 miles from the town where I lived to the town where we went to school, and which happens to be Granby, Colorado. If you don't know, if you've never heard of Granby, Colorado on national news, let me tell you, if you look up Killdozer, um, there's a whole thing on it. There's a whole documentary on Netflix about that Killdozer, the man who built himself, welded himself into the
Oh yeah, I remember
bulldozer
that.
and went through the town. That
Yeah.
was my hometown.
Oh wow.
That's my hometown. That's where I went to school, where I graduated high school. Yeah. So anyways, I would get on the bus and go to school. When my friend and I would get to school, we, our friend would pick us up at school. We'd go to his house. We'd drink all day. He'd take us back to school. We'd get on the school bus and we'd go home. And that's what I did my pretty much the whole 3 quarters of my senior year. Now, I had all credits that I needed. I was already available. I already had all my credits. By the time semester came, I didn't even have to be there. But, it's my senior year. Prom, all those huge things that go on senior year. I wanted to be a part of all of that. Well, it turns out I didn't want to be a part of it, apparently, because I spent my time drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking. So I managed to graduate high school. Um, I even managed to graduate high school with decent grades, and I was enrolled in college. I had put a deposit down on my dorm. I had my classes ready. All I had to do was show up. Sit, graduated high school. A week later, have I I don't know if it was the alcoholism, or because I was definitely an alcoholic at that time. I mean, there was no denying it. I did, but There was no denying it for me now. I was an alcoholic, an active alcoholic. And I moved out of my Aunt Vanetta and Uncle Terry's house into my own apartment, and I proceeded to party, party, party. And and I woke up on the day I was supposed to leave for college, and I was hungover. And I said, "Screw it, I'm not going," and I didn't. Um, and so one of the things I this is kind of an important part of it. So when my dad passed away, my grandparents, my dad's mom and dad did not know me. They had never met me. They lived in Missouri. They knew of me, I think, but I'm not really, I can't swear to that. But so the first time my grandparents meet me, my grandfather was a preacher in the Church of Christ. Um, and so, anyways, the first time my grandparents meet me is when I have flown from Colorado to Missouri to bring their son home in a box to be buried. That's when I met my grandparents for the first time. And it turned out to be the most amazing thing. And I wished so badly I would have held on tighter to all of that, because um, the day that we buried my dad, my grandfather sat with my sister and I all afternoon, and we went through the Bible and we talked about baptism, and we did the whole, went through everything, and we learned all about baptism. And at midnight that night, my grandfather, who was in his 80s, called, had the church opened up, and he took us down and he baptized myself and my sister. And it was a very incredible experience. And it was, and I do still hold on to that part of it. And it was a very amazing thing. Um, but, I just, too many people think that once you're baptized, you know, you're saved and you don't have to work at it anymore and you won't get lost in the tide of it all. And that's not true. That's not true. There is a whole lot of work that has to go into it afterwards. And although I started out really strong and really good, um, I'm human.
Yeah.
And I fell from grace. And that's, and I've thought about it and I've talked to people about it, and thought, because my baptism came before my addiction was full blown, do I need to go and get it done again? Well, the answer about that is no. I don't need to. I was baptized, um, and I did work at it for a long time. I fell from grace, but I have worked my way back to where I am back, on that path, on that good path. And I'm not the only one that's ever fallen off that path after they have been baptized. It happens a lot. But that was something I had to explore and I had to find out for myself. And I'm very comfortable with the fact that I don't need to, it was true, it was real, it was exactly what it was supposed to be. And my own failings is what got me where I was. And because I am, I mean, I'm never going to be a perfect Christian. Baptism does not make that happen for anybody.
Right.
So anyway, so I proceeded to get, worse and worse. So about 3 months after I moved out of my aunt and uncle's house, I ended up in rehab. 19 years old. I'm in rehab. I've got a nasty attitude. I hate the world. Everybody's out to get me, and all of that. I mean, it just, you know. I was young and I was full of addiction and hate and trauma and but I went to the dang rehab. I stayed there for 45 days. I listened to all the stuff they had to say. I learned how to smoke cigarettes and drink coffee, and I started smoking in rehab. I started smoking Pall Mall filterless. That's what cigarettes I started smoking. So, I mean, like I am never one who has done anything other than full force all the time. I mean, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it in the most messed up possible, chaotic way I can.
Extreme.
I'm the same way.
Extreme. Absolutely. Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. I'm going to take it all the way to the very bitter end, and I'm going to just barely pull back before it gets really bad. And then I'm going to say, oh, watch this. And then I'm going to dive into it full force. And that's exactly how it always was. So yeah, I started out with Pall Mall filterless cigarettes when I started smoking. But that was 45 days in. They give me a pass to for the weekend to leave. I had saved up some money. I got my money. I called a cab, me and another girl. We got in that cab. We went directly down to the first liquor store we came to. We bought us, I don't know how many ever bottles of Boone's Farm Strawberry Hills wine you can buy with 20 bucks. And I'm going to tell you something right now. Back then, you could buy a lot of them.
I knew it was the
And we
Boone's Farm.
proceeded to get drunk.
Yeah.
It was cheap and it went down smooth. And, that was it. So we proceeded to get very, very drunk, and then we called the rehab and we told them we're really drunk, and they tried to tell us, come back and let's get you back into detox, and we're like, no, we're not doing that. Maybe you can come get us in the morning. But yeah, by that time they did not want to take us back, and so there we were. My friend's family came and got her right away. I got my suitcase from the rehab center, and I had to go and stay at the YWCA until I could convince one of my family members to send me a bus ticket. And so I went home, and that was just, I hadn't been there very long, but um, it did me absolutely any no good whatsoever, and that's okay. So I was not ready to quit showing my butt. So I continued on to drink and drink and drink, and it was just getting worse. And so I decided I'm going to move to Denver, and I moved to Denver and I discovered cocaine, and I thought, oh my gosh, why has everybody been keeping this from me? I could snort cocaine and I could drink for days upon days upon days, and I didn't have to deal with none of it. I didn't have to think about none of it. I could just keep snorting cocaine and drinking Jack and Jose, and we were the best of buddies, and we followed those white lines all the way down the freeway every chance we got. And that's what it was. I mean, I drank whiskey with a tequila back. That's how I drank, and I snorted cocaine, and I stayed that way. And I stayed that way for a very, very long time. From about 1990, when I graduated high school, until the day I quit drinking, I cannot even tell you. There are so few memories in all of that, because I was the person who blacked out every time they drank, and I drank every day. And I got my first DUI when we were in Denver. And what happened is I was in a car with my brother. He was about I think he was about 17 years old. He had lost his driver's license because he's reckless. Because my brother also took a very reckless path from where we came from. But he was driving my car, and a cop. We pulled up to a stoplight. A cop pulled up next to us. wasn't looking at us, wasn't doing anything. I was drunk, drunk, drunk. And my brother panicked. He took the immediate right hand turn and then immediate left hand turn. Didn't turn on his blinker. Didn't, nothing. Pulls in this dark place. He hands me his bag of pot and he's like, "Here, stick this in your bra and get in the driver's seat." And stupid me shoved it down in there, got in the driver's seat, just took my, put it in drive and took my foot off the gas and moved just a little bit. And there they were. And I got a DUI.
Mm.
And luckily, they didn't charge me with the pot. They did find it, but they didn't charge me with it. 9 months later, I'm back home in in Granby, where I was born and raised, and because I thought this city stuff is not good for me, so I went home. And Thanksgiving, we're all together. We're having a big Thanksgiving dinner. We're all drunk, drunk, drunk. Um, my friend and my brother, my stepbrother, started fighting. I asked my stepdad, I said, "Hey, can I take your truck and take him home so they don't get to fighting and ruin my cousin's house?" And he's like, "Sure." So I load him up. We get in the truck. We head home, or we're heading back to Hot Sulphur. We're about 2 miles out of Hot Sulphur, and here comes this cop car. I mean, sailing by me. And then all of a sudden, he whips around, and I'm like, "Oh no." And I look at my friend and my cousin who's in the car with me, and I said, "They're after me." And I said, "They're not going to get me." And I pushed the gas and started to speed up. And thank God I came to my senses and I was like, "I can't do this." And I pulled over. I jerked the keys out of the ignition. I threw them on the ground and I got out of the car. I put my hands up and I said, "I'm drunk and I don't have a license." And yeah. Uh, so yeah, that did later on help me in court because they did say that I was the most honest and I was very I did not fight them. I just I let it all happen. And but yeah, and so that did help me in court. The judge sentenced me to a year in jail, but he suspended 357 days. Thank God, because I don't think I could have
Yeah.
stayed in jail for a year. I was in the cell with this lady who my mom went to school with, and she was in there because she had stabbed her husband because she had caught him molesting their granddaughter. So yeah, it was like, yeah, I don't want to be in here anymore. I don't want to do this, so you know I thought, and most people, when they say, "Okay, I don't want to do this anymore," they're like, "Okay, hey, it's time to stop and get myself together and let's move on." That's not what my thoughts were. My thoughts were, I got to find a place where I can go drink and nobody's going to bother me. And that's what I did. I remember, I mean, I grew, I spent a lot of time in the town of Walden when I was growing up because my aunt owned a bar there, and I could go there. And Walden operates under a whole different kind of you know thing. It's a very small town oriented. Everybody knows everybody, and when things start getting, the town comes together and like, you know don't come around here messing with us, kind of thing. So I knew that I could go up there and I could do what I needed to do and continue drinking, and I did. So I moved up there, and I'm just staying schnockered all the time, getting drunk with the sheriff, getting drunk with whomever was in the bars all the time. I'm very promiscuous. I'm spreading it around. I mean, and this is the sad fact of the matter, but I don't know how I was the town bicycle and everybody got a ride, and that's just the way it was because I had this very distorted view of love because of what I was taught my entire life. My mom would tell me that she loved me, and in the next sentence, she would tell me that I was not beautiful or I was not pretty, and I was never going to find a man to love me the way, you know, that to ever really love me. And but I love you, and so yeah, I had a very very distorted view of love. And so, yes, I tried to find love in very unhealthy and nasty ways. And yes, it became a problem where I eventually, I was not feeling good. I had to go to the doctor. I had chlamydia. So I had to get that taken care of, but the doctor insisted while I was there, because I didn't look so good, that we needed to take some blood, do some blood work. Well, turns out I was right on the verge of alcoholic hepatitis, and she was like, you really need to stop drinking. We got to do something about this, because she says it won't be long and you'll be there. Okay, so this is the thing about alcoholic hepatitis. Today, today in 2025, a woman has about a 30% chance of survival for 5 years with alcoholic hepatitis, where a man has about a 70% chance. So that's now, but this was back in 1997, and so I mean, I was right there. My enzymes were, and she said, the next time you come, I'm certain that we will have to, and once you're there, there's not a whole lot we can do for you. It is a death sentence. It really is. That's all there is to it. And I was like, good. That's what I want. That's what I've been working for. I have I have tried to take my own life 7 different times. I tried to slit my own throat from ear to ear. I do not want to be here, because I do not want to live with all this trauma. Okay, well, in the addiction, I had totally let go of God. However, I still prayed every day. I still prayed. I wasn't doing right by Him. I wasn't doing the things I needed to do. I wasn't being obedient. I wasn't being faithful. I wasn't doing all of those things, but I prayed every day. I don't know why, but I did. And I have no idea what happened on May 31st of 1997. But whatever it had to have been very bad, because when I woke up on the 1st of June, nobody would talk to me. Nobody wanted anything to do with me. Nobody had anything good to say to me or around me or wanted to be a part of anything I had to do. And I was like, um, I don't know. I had fallen at some point in the night, because I had a knot on my head, and I have no idea, still to this day. And I still believe that that is because God is protecting me from whatever it was, because I don't know. Um,
You don't know why
but
people were mad at you
I
still.
don't know why. No, I have no idea, and I don't want to know at this point.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's probably best that I don't. We've all moved on from it. And like I said, like, I mean, I just, and this is the thing, that at that point, when that had all happened, these were all people that were my bar friends, and these were all these people that, whatever, and they are also people that are not a part of my life and have not been for a great many years, because of the path I chose with recovery. So I didn't know what to do, and I started praying, and I started praying, and I started praying, and I just kept praying, and I talked to Him, and um I told Him I can't do this anymore, and I don't know what else to do. I don't know what to do other than pray. And it was rough. It was really rough for a while. Um, I had tremendous withdrawals and detox, with all of that. Alcohol is it's a tough one. It is a tough one to detox from, and it seemed like it took months, and I just felt awful, and but I just kept praying, talking to God, and I just and it became easier every day, um, because I did have God, because He was it. Um, I have no faith in AA. I have no faith in NA. I just I do not look down on anybody who has been successful with it, because great, that's what they needed. But it was not something that worked for me. I tried AA meetings, and what I would find when I did go to AA meetings is, before I would walk through the door, I would look around and find the bar, because I knew there was one close by. I've never been to an AA meeting that did not have a bar close by, ever.
Hmm.
And I would find that bar, and immediately that's where I went when the AA meeting was over. I could not sit there. I it just never worked for me. I even have recently gone to a couple NA meetings. It wasn't so bad, but there again, the only way I could do it was God. He is the way,
Amen.
and so that's how I did it. I put it. I gave it to Him. I let Him have it, and I struggled with it, and I kept fighting, and I kept fighting, and I kept fighting. So and so that's that's my addiction story, and that's how I quit. That's how I came into recovery, or that's how I got sober. Now, how I got to recovery was a couple of years later, when I realized that there was absolutely nobody to blame for what happened to me and my addiction but me. And when I came to that reality, I was no longer just sober. I was no longer just clean and sober. I was in recovery. And um and 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 this is an important part that I always have to tell, although it doesn't have, I mean, it is a part of my story. And because my mom is such a huge part of my story, when shortly after I celebrated 20 years of recovery, my mom became very, very sick. My mom was, as you have heard, a wicked alcoholic. She had a bad liver, she had COPD, and my husband and my son was at a friend's house. My husband and I were had gone out the night before celebrating our anniversary, and we we got a call from her that morning because she couldn't walk. She couldn't walk because she said she had gotten up from the couch to go to bed, and she fell, and she couldn't get her legs to work anymore. They wouldn't move. They were, they were very, very weak. Well, she managed to get herself to her bedroom, crawled into her bedroom, got herself in bed, called us the next morning. I went down there to check on her, and she was very, very frail, very, very weak. And so I had to call the ambulance. The ambulance took her to Steamboat, which was about an hour away from us, and that was also that's where the hospital was. And that at that time, the doctor came in, seen her. They did some blood work, did that kind of stuff. He took me out in the hall, and he told me that my mom was dying. She was actively dying, and she had about 2 to 3 months. And I am going to we need to get her in hospice care. And I was like, I can't put her in hospice care because the closest hospice is here, and that's an hour away from my home, and my son has school, and I have a business. I have to, I have to have that income. I can't leave her here. I'm not leaving my mother. And so we got all the arrangements made. the hardest part about the whole situation was I had to give my mom in my home where I never allowed alcohol because of my recovery and because of my son and the not wanting to expose him to that kind of a lifestyle. Um, there was never alcohol in my home. That was not part of it. But I had to give my mom 2 ounces of alcohol every 2 hours for 3 months in my home to keep her heart from stopping because she was so bad an alcoholic. And I slept by my mom's bed in my house, which we got her a hospital bed. And I slept in a chair beside my mom's bed for the next 3 months and did the things I had to do, giving her alcohol to keep her alive and all of that until she took her exit from this world. And so that's all part of my story. And it's just been a couple of years ago that I came to the online recovery world. I had just celebrated my 26th year of sobriety or of recovery, and I met up with some people that had a group, and I became an admin in that group. And then we broke away from that group and created another group, and then I have broken away from that group and I'm no longer a part of any of those groups any longer, and created my group, which is called God Bless Recovery. And Lee wanted to know about the mama bear. And so
Yeah.
this is why I'm Mama Bear. Um, and this is something that I have come to recently. I mean, I was struggling. So a few months ago, some things went down in the recovery world. There has been a lot of hard feelings and a lot of I don't know, some discomfort and stress amongst which it is what it is. Anytime you get a bunch of humans together, there's going to be conflict from time to time.
I
But
tried to
anyway,
warn
so
Jason about
when
this.
I was part of those that first group, um, I because I'm not one to keep my mouth shut. I'm not one who's going to powder your butt. I That's not how I work my program. That's not how I work when I'm giving people advice. I spent too many years enabling my parents by taking care of everything and letting them just be what they were. I was a giver to my brother and an enabler to my parents, and I had to quit that. And so I am not I'm not the person, and I tell my cub I call them my cubs, the people that are close to me, the people that love me, the people that are around me, the people in my group. Lee and many people call me Mama Bear. I call them my cubs because I love them, because I protect them, because I am willing to sharpen my claws and go to bat with for them at any time. Um, I They started, one of the women in the group started calling me Mama Bear because they were all trying to be big kids and do big kid things, and I told them they were not doing it. We were not going about it in the wrong way, and that I was very disappointed in them, and that I had lost a lot of confidence in them because they were acting like children. I made them all think. And a couple of days later, they came to me, they apologized, they told me I was right, and I became Mama Bear. They started calling me Mama Bear. That's when people started calling me Mama Bear. However, a few months when all this distension and all of this stuff started going on in the group, I became very hurt, and I was to the point where I was like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be Mama Bear. because it does nothing but break my heart. Because I have a lot of people who turn to me, who come to me, who I have a lot of secrets that I carry. I have a lot of weight that I bear because I'm the mama bear. Um, and I realized a few months ago when I was going through all of that and I was about to decide to start telling everybody, no, I'm not Mama Bear, I'm Jodi. Please call me Jodi. I came to the point that, you know what, I didn't become Mama Bear in the recovery world. I've always been Mama Bear. From when I started taking care of my mom and my brother and later in life, you know, I ran my own daycare for 10 years. I have always been somebody that people come to and talk to about things, and strangers strangers tell me things that I don't ever solicit. They just come up and tell me things. Um, and I came to realize that yeah, Mama Bear is who I am, but it's not something I have become recently. It's something I've always been, and it's just now that people are calling me by my name.
I
Um,
remembered as you were telling your
and
story.
Jason wanted to know about um, the church I go to. I am a member of the Church of Christ. I go to the Fort Payne Church of Christ down here. I have always been, you know, I've always up until, you know, for a while I did go to a community church, which was a non-denominational church, and the Church of Christ is also a non-denominational church. Please don't mix it up with the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints, because I am not a Mormon. And I'm not saying anything bad about Mormons. I'm just saying I am not one. I go to the Church of Christ, not the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints. Because many people, um, you know, there's a very huge distinction
Yeah.
between them. Um, I mean, we're about as far apart as you can be. Um, we the Church of Christ is completely Bible based. Um, a lot of people, when they think about the Church of Christ, they think, oh, you're the ones that don't have musical instruments during worship, during any of our and yes, that's exactly, we don't we don't have guitars, we don't have pianos, we don't have anything. We and that's the one thing that people remember the most about us, is that we don't use musical instruments, that we sing a cappella, and that's the thing they remember the most about us. But we are, everything we do is comes directly out of the Bible. It is all scripturally sound. I we My family and I attend church every Sunday from 9:30 to 10:30 we have Bible study. 10:30 to 11:30 we have worship, and then at 1 o'clock we have another worship hour, um, which today um, we didn't go to, but you know, typically we are there. Um, and then Wednesday nights we do Bible study as well. Um, the it's you know, re- we refer to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. We refer to it as the three heads of God. Um, they are my forever family. Um, the congregation that we're a part of now is amazing. It's been an amazing place for my son. And Alabama, we came to Alabama because of things that my son was struggling with back in Walden, as far as some bullying and such things as that, because he goes to church, and his stubborn mother will not let him do anything until he has fulfilled that part of his Sunday. And so they tended to make fun of him for that, and they made fun of him for not being athletic. My son is very smart, very intelligent, and very faithful. And so they used all that against him to rip him apart. And so that's my son has gone to church since he was a baby. Um, and recently, my husband was raised in a different church, but he is now a member of the Church of Christ. And shortly before Christmas, he was baptized. And so yeah, that's the church I attend to. It's the people is the church, not the building. In fact, the sign on the building says the Church of Christ meets here. Yeah, it's all out of the Bible. No, we don't use music. And simply, if you wonder about that, it says in the Bible to raise your voice in praise of the Lord. We take it very literally. Because, I mean, it says not to take away or add to the Bible. And many people say, well, but it doesn't say not to. Yeah, but it doesn't say to. And they say, well, but it doesn't say you don't have to. Okay, well, it doesn't. It doesn't say that we can use it. It doesn't say we can't. And so this is how I explain it. If you give your son $20 and you tell him to go to the store and buy bread, milk, and eggs, and he comes home, and yes, he has the bread, he has the milk, he has the eggs, but he also has ice cream and soda and candy. And you say, I sent you to the store for these 3 things. Yeah, you did. And I got those 3 things. Yes, but you also got these 3 things. And he's like, but you didn't say I couldn't. But I didn't say you could.
Yeah.
So
That's a good way to look at it.
that's, huh?
That's a good way to look at it. That's a good
And so, yeah,
analogy there.
I can't, hold on just a second. I think my thing has gone off. I don't know what's going on.
I did survive a tropical storm last night.
They said it was coming up to North Carolina, I think. So
Yeah, it hit last night here.
I can't. Okay, what? I'm sorry.
I said that was a good analogy for the music.
I still can't hear you. I'm so sorry.
well, you can't beat the story that she told.
No.
She gives a good interview. And it's quite a heart wrenching story, but it's a story of victory. Because she's providing for a family right now, and she's making sure that they're in church, and she's giving those kids a good home, bringing them
Yeah.
up the right way. And I'm sure they hear about the downfalls of addiction and things like that. I'm sure she's very outspoken, so I'm sure at the right time that she deems necessary, those kids are going to get their lessons in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think somebody else.
The devil doesn't like us to do these things. He always gives a
No.
little technical difficulty.
I'm sorry, guys. I can't hear you. I don't know what's going on with my Bluetooth.
Huh.
Well, you got your story in, so I think that's the important thing. I'm
Yeah.
sure we had some follow up questions, but
Yeah.
it
I'll tell
might
you
be an
what,
okay
this
time.
this story though really is like she had to be a survivor from like a really, really early age, and that's not a normal thing. And it just shows that like God was by her side even when she didn't know it. Like he was there
Mm-hmm.
because he brought her through it all. She learned to like take care of her brother and of her parents. And through those struggles, he played. Well, and then she fell into the addiction, and he played the role that he specializes in, and that's as a healer, and he healed her. And then he was standing there with open arms, ready to take her back. Like, there's a lot of lessons from her story, and another lesson is it's important to remember that when you're on the fence of following God, or you're in full fledged following God mode, Satan's going to attack you harder than ever. He is. Like I was thinking back to when she said she got baptized
Yes, he is.
by the grandparents. I think it was when she met her grandparents. She was baptized. Um, he came right back and attacked her,
Hmm.
and right back into the addiction thing she went, and that's how he works. But we have a God that forgives us through all that. He's always standing there with us, and is always ready to accept us back when we're ready.
Yep,
Well, I guess we'll wrap
absolutely.
this one on up because of the technical difficulties. And unless you can hear us again, we don't want to put you in that position, but we appreciate you coming on
You do have a
here.
very clean ear.
We appreciate the story, and
I got one of
we
those
trust.
TikTok things.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, we won't make you do all that. So we will go ahead and close it out. We do appreciate your story. It's a very inspiring story. I actually dealt with alcohol addiction
Absolutely.
myself, uh, and so it's always nice to hear how somebody else beat that addiction themselves. Like I relied on God myself to beat mine. So it was a great story. It was great to have you on here. We don't want to have you
Hmm.
waking up not being able to move your neck tomorrow trying to hear us. So we will go ahead and close out if you'd like.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Appreciate you, Mama
great.
Bear.
Sounds good.
All right. Anything else, Lee?
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for
Uh,
having me.
you guys are both two of the most professional individuals I've ever met. I'm glad you're both running. You're doing what you're doing. It was great to network like this in the Lord. I think God wants us to have a unity, and I'm glad we were able to establish that today. So keep on being a victor. You've
Absolutely.
almost got 30 years
That's impressive.
of being a
I
veteran
do.
and recovering. You're still all about it. So we're very happy with
Yes.
what you're doing. You're a trailblazer in this community. And we really appreciate you, Jodi.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. I love you both dearly.
All right.
Take
Well,
care.
we'll let you go.
Okay. Thank you.
You have a good
Have a
day.
great one.
Hey, bye bye.
You too.